Hey guys, by the end of this editing series that we will be doing, you guys should be able to efficiently and effectively color grade and color correct all clips, time remap all clips and cinematics, add effects and impact to your eliminations, successfully execute clean cinematics, and much more.
Hey guys, in today's video we're going to teach you how to record Fortnite cinematics as well as add velocity between them and create transitions by using BlurMo and pan crop. In this video we will be using Adobe After Effects. There will be timestamps on screen for recording cinematics, how to time remap, and how to use BlurMo and pan crop to transition between cinematics. What is a cinematic? A cinematic is when you cut from a clip or gameplay and transition to another angle of your clip / gameplay to give the viewers more knowledge. Now that you know what a cinematic is, Zenith's going to show you how to record them.
Okay, so once you guys have launched up Fortnite, you're going to want to go to Career, and then Replays, and then open up your replay folder. Okay, so once you guys are in replay mode, I recommend plugging in a controller for smoother cinematics, but I'm now going to discuss to you the different types of camera modes in Fortnite replay. So the first type of camera mode is gameplay. Gameplay is just the default camera positioning as you would play the actual game. Third person is another type of camera mode that allows you to pivot on a character. I would not recommend using third person to record cinematic simply because it limits your camera movement. Now to the next camera mode, drone follow. Drone follow is pretty self-explanatory. The camera is pretty much always focusing on the actual character. It's following the character. And drone attach, one of my most used camera modes. If you have a low aperture like I do, the character is always going to be in focus because it is not set to drone attach. And the last camera mode, which is drone free, self-explanatory as well. You can move around anywhere you want. However, using this camera mode while recording a cinematic, you can get your character out of focus because the character model is not always going to be in focus because it's set to drone free. So now moving on to camera settings. If you click on this icon, this will bring up the camera settings. So right now I'm set to drone attach. Basically, exposure, what you want to know is it controls how light and dark your footage is. So if you turn off auto exposure and expose your image like this, you can pretty much see the higher the exposure, the more light being let into the camera, which leaves for overexposed shot, which we do not want. And if you turn down the exposure, the footage gets darker. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to be explaining exposure too much. For now, you can just leave that on. Moving on to focal length. Focal length is how zoomed in your camera is. This controls how much depth of field there is in your actual shot. So I recommend anywhere between 100 and 140 millimeter for your focal length. This gives you a really nice background. Now moving on to aperture, also known as f-stop. Aperture controls the blurriness in the actual background. The lower your aperture, the more blurry your background is going to be, which gives your character more focus and more of the actual spotlight when you record your cinematics. So if I increase the aperture, the background is going to be more clear and in focus, as you can tell. Depending on the cinematics you want to get, I recommend anywhere between a 2.8 and a 1.0 aperture. This gives you a really nice in focus character and a blurry background. And for autofocus, you can just keep that on, simply because we're shooting drone attached and we always want our character model in focus. Okay, so when you open up After Effects, you should get a pretty similar screen to what I have right now. These are just previous projects. What you're going to want to do is create a new project, and then you want to make a new composition. So for the sake of this, I'll just call it tutorial, and then I'll make it 1920 by 1080, and then I'll set the frame rate to 30 FPS. So once you have your clip on your timeline, just like so, what you're going to want to do is go to the part of the cinematic that you wanted the actual camera movement to start. So in this case, it's going to be right here for me. So now I'm going to hit Control-Shift-D on my keyboard to cut this clip and delete the first part of it. And we can just shift click and drag this to the beginning of the timeline. I'm gonna play the cinematic so you see what we have. So it's quite slow and quite boring, isn't it? So in order to spice things up and to add some more flow to this, we're going to enable time mapping on this clip to make it more smooth. So how you do that is you're going to hit Control Alt T on your keyboard to enable time mapping. You're going to go to the first frame of your cinematic and you're going to enable time mapping. And you're going to go to the last frame of the clip and enable and keyframe time mapping as well. So you're going to shift click both of these keyframes and then hit F9 on your keyboard to enable easy ease. So now once you have done that, you can highlight these keyframes again and you're going to want to go into the graph editor right here. So the graph editor is pretty much how you manipulate the speed of the clip. So I'm going to want my cinematic to be roughly 1.5 seconds. So I'm going to drag and select this keyframe right here and I'm going to move it right here. So that's going to be the end of my clip. You can also control the end of your clip by moving this up and down on this timeline marker. So this is roughly going to be the length of my cinematic. So once you've done that, we're going to then select the first keyframe right here like so. And we're going to drag this handle. This handle allows you to control the speed of the initial part of the cinematic. So in this case, I want my cinematic to start fast, slow down in the middle, and then increase speed toward the end. So you're going to have a graph that roughly looks similar to mine like this. And we'll play and see what we have. This part of time mapping is a lot of trial and error. I never have one set graph where I always have the two handles in the exact same position. It's all a matter of preference and how long you actually want your cinematic to be. But with practice, you can kind of get faster at time mapping. So that looks quite good. Now once we've done that, we can just cut the end of this clip off. And this should be our first cinematic, what it's looking like. So it looks quite good. Obviously, there's no sound effects, no color grade, which we'll be discussing in further tutorials. However, for our first time wrap clip, that looks quite nice. I'm gonna come back to you guys when I have all my clips time wrapped and I'll show you what we have. Alright, so I just finished time wrapping these cinematics and this is what I have. So the cinematics had decent movement, but obviously it's a bunch of hard cuts and it doesn't look too clean. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add transitions, and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to pan crop and BlurMo curves. So you guys need the Sapphire plugin in order to transition accordingly. The plugin I'm using is Sapphire _S_BlurMo curves, and you just apply it to your clip. Basically what we're going to do, we're going to create artificial camera movement. Pretty much what I mean by that is we're going to add a transition with the camera movement so the cinematics have more of a flow and smoother transition instead of hard cuts like before. So once you have the effect applied to your clip, you're going to go to the last frame of your clip like so and look at the next frame of the next cinematic. So I see that this cinematic is panning toward the right, so I'm gonna have this camera movement maybe come down into the right along with this cinematic. So go to the end of the frame and you're gonna want to keyframe Z distance, shift X, shift Y, and you're going to wrap X, you're gonna reflect, and wrap Y, you're gonna reflect as well. This pretty much makes it so the edges of the clip are mirrored. Without that, you would not have any mirroring. It would just be the actual clip itself. So you want to make sure you check these boxes and make sure they're set to reflect. So now once you've done that, you are going to keyframe all three of these values, and I'm going to shift my clip to the right because I want this next cinematic coming in to the start from the left and pan right, so we have a smooth camera movement. So I'm gonna go back from here 1, 2, 4 frames back, and I'm going to set this value to 1 to reset it. So if we play this, we can see we have a kind of swiping motion, and it looks alright, but you can definitely see it's not the best. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come to the start of this frame, apply BlurMo curves, reflect, keyframe, Z distance, Shift X, Shift Y, and we're gonna start this one to the left. The problem with this cinematic is that you see the mirroring. You don't want to swipe it so much to the left where there's a lot of mirroring occur. You want just a bit of mirroring because we really want that camera movement exaggerated. So we're going to go 4 frames forward, and then we're going to keyframe this back to 1. So we have this swiping to the right. So if we play it, it looks alright, but you can definitely tell that there's a bunch of mirroring going on, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do, we're going to hit U on our keyboard twice to open up all of our effects. Basically, this is where our sapphire effect is, and this is how we can ease the keyframes. So we're going to drag select the Shift X keyframes, and we're going to hit F9 on our keyframe like we did previously to set these keyframes to ease, and we're going to go into the graph editor. We're going to zoom in on the graph editor by holding Alt and scrolling up on your wheel. And now what we want this graph to look like is we want the shifting of the actual camera. We want it to start slow and swipe fast out because we want a very fast pan to the right. So what you can do is you can select this keyframe, and we're going to drag this up, and then we're going to drag this one forward so you get a graph roughly like this. It does not have to be identical, but we want something along the lines of this. So now if you see, if I drag through, it slowly starts to pan to the right, and then it really pans to the right a lot, just like so. So now what we want to do is, just like previously, just like we did on this clip, we're gonna hit U on this clip twice to open up the effect controls, and we're going to shift select these keyframes, F9 on our keyboard, and going to the graph editor once again. We're gonna zoom in, and then we're gonna make pretty much the opposite graph because we want this to start fast and slowly pan out. And doing this gets rid of most of the mirroring because how fast it is to the eye. So we're going to select this keyframe, and we're going to drag this down so it comes in fast and then eases its way out, just like so. So if we play this transition, we have a beautiful swipe to the right, and it looks much smoother than when we had before. So now I'm going to finish BlurMoing the rest of the cinematics, and I'll come back to you guys when I've finished all the BlurMo. Okay, I've finished BlurMo curving our cinematics. Now I'll show you what we have. So the cinematics are pretty good. The transitions are definitely smoother than they were before, but there still could be more movement. There's not much actual camera movement besides the push in and the pans. So to create a bit more realistic feel and give the video more depth in the actual camera, we can add pan crop, which is a method of keyframing position, scale, and rotation. In this case, BlurMo already has taken care of the position and the scale, but it is not rotated. So what we're going to do is we're going to add rotation by tapping R on our keyboard, and then we're going to go to the end just like we did before, or sorry, we're going to go to the start of the first cinematic, and we are going to keyframe rotation just like so, and I like to go about 7 degrees, and then we're going to go to the end of the first cinematic, and we're going to keyframe this to 0. So if you play that back, it looks quite weird because there's black space and the rotation's kind of linear. It's the same pace as it's rotating, and it's quite boring. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna shift select both of these keyframes like earlier, easy ease, open the graph editor, and we're going to speed this first keyframe up, and we're gonna speed this one. So if you now watch what we have, it does much better, much smoother rotation. So now we're going to apply an effect called motion tile, and this will pretty much cover up the black edges. So I'm going to set the output width to 330 and then the output height to 400, and then I'm going to hit mirror edges so it gives it a mirrored effect that we can't really notice. So if we play that, it adds very, very subtle camera movement, but in the end it will make a very, very big difference. So now we're going to start this cinematic with the same rotation we had at the end of this to keep its same flow. So we're going to keyframe the rotation and we're going to set that to 0, and then we're going to keyframe this last frame at -7. So we get the opposite rotation. It starts positively rotating, then it starts negatively rotating, just like so. So once we do that, just like before, we're going to go into the graph editor, easy ease, make this fast rotation, just like so, and then just like so. So once we play that back, we'll see that we have rotation in our cinematics, and this will add so much more realistic camera movement to your cinematics, and it's very, very subtle, but it helps a lot. Now we're going to add motion tile, and same thing. Now with black bars, maybe an overlay, chromatic aberrations, and different effects, these cinematics would be looking in top tier shape. However, we're going to be talking about in further tutorials more about color grading, color correction, and all those other types of effects. I just finished the pan crop, and this is how our final cinematics are looking. So not too shabby. If you guys did enjoy this tutorial, once again, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe if you guys would love to see more editing content, editing tutorials, montages, and stuff like that.